This is the Show Up Show, helping coaches, service providers, leaders, and entrepreneurs to master showing up to build their brand, authority, and grow their business. Whether it's showing up on social media, in front of an audience, on a live interview, or an actual stage, this podcast is going to help you overcome visibility fear to confidently brand yourself as the authority in your industry. I'm Deirdre Tshien, aka the Confidence and Visibility Queen, and I am on a mission to share how I went from a nobody to the confident leader I am today, what I have learned and what I have done to build my brand and business from scratch, and help you do the same so that you can make an impact in the world with the meaningful work that you do. Whether you are new to the business world or feeling unsure about public visibility, or you want to be seen and heard in a way that doesn't feel icky but authentic to you, you will discover how to become visible in your own unique way and show up as the confident entrepreneur you have always dreamed about becoming. Now, it's time to get you show up and be confidently visible so you can easily attract more clients and opportunities for yourself. Joining us today is the co-founder and CEO of Capsho, the fastest way to grow and market your podcast. Capsho is an AI-powered podcast content writer that helps entrepreneurs who podcast to quickly amplify their message and grow their listeners. She's also the creator of Content Dripping, author of Honey Trap Marketing, and host of the Grow My Podcast show. She's a serial entrepreneur, having founded and led 7 businesses across 5 industries in the last 9 years, and has navigated the entire spectrum of experiences and emotions that comes with starting, running, closing, and exiting businesses. With a hands-on experience in successfully growing her businesses to 6 and 7 figures, she now helps podcasting entrepreneurs beat obscurity, amplify their message, and build their movements. So guys, help me welcoming our guest today, the founder and CEO of Capsule, Deirdre Tshien, all the way from New York City.
Hi, so good to be here.
So nice to have you here to talk about podcasts, and because it's one of my passions and I'm really passionate about it, so I started a second podcast. I know it sounds crazy. So I want to know what inspired you to start podcasting in the first place.
Yeah, I was actually, I had two, I feel like I have two starts at it. The first one was, like almost 8 years ago when it was just not as accessible. You know, there was not as many tools that would help you get started. It was not easy. It was so complicated, in fact, that I pod faded after, I think we released 2 episodes, and I was just like, this is too hard. And then the second time I started, which is when I actually got into it, was 3 years ago. I had a coaching business, and at the time, my mentor was like, if you want to be able to get your message out there, to first of all find your message and then to actually get it out there, a podcast is the best way to do that. So I was like, oh, well, I tried this once again, but I'm going to put my big girl panties on and I'm going to try it again. And it stuck this time. I had started that podcast. It was for my coaching business. So it was about digital marketing for e-commerce businesses, and grew that. Off the back of that, grew my coaching business to multiple 6 figures. And then basically through that journey, I think I launched, talk about, you're about to launch your second podcast. I launched about 5 podcasts since then. And then obviously that journey led me to Capsho.
Wow. Okay. I want to know what was hard for you the first time, because I know a lot of people, they want to start a podcast, but it's hard. It's difficult for them. So I want to know what was hard for you the first time, so you gave up.
Yeah, the first time, as I said, it just wasn't, the podcasting industry just wasn't as mature. I mean, it was still not super mature, but it's not as mature as it is now. So there wasn't really a great recording software, for example. There wasn't a really easy to use editing software. You kind of needed to know either how to use something like Audacity, or like you had to almost be an audio engineer to know how to edit anything at that time. It wasn't really easy to, there weren't the number of hosting platforms that make it so easy for you to publish into an RSS feed, to create and publish into an RSS feed. So I think it was just at every stage, it was just really hard. And then even when I started my like the second time around, I still probably wasn't, there were so many more tools that could help, but I wasn't as up to date with what those were. So I didn't know how to edit episodes. So I literally would hit record. I'd record locally just using QuickTime or something on my laptop. Didn't have a microphone or anything like that. And because I didn't know how to edit, and the whole editing thing really, like, it's scary. Like, I didn't, I was just like, you know what? If I make a mistake, I'm just going to stop it and I'll just start the recording all over again, because I didn't know how to edit out mistakes or anything like that. So that's literally how I got started, even the second time around. And then, but the more that you get into it, there's so many communities, even on Facebook and stuff, that just, where people are talking about these things, where they're like, what's the best editing software to use? What's the best recording software to use? Things like that. And it's a lot easier to get the help that you need now.
Yeah. So as we know, podcasting has gained a lot of traction in the recent years, and I always joke about it. I say everyone has a podcast now, and I, for one, has 2 podcasts, and you have like 5 podcasts, right? For example. So, however, the research shows that the average podcaster quit after 7 episodes. So, what would you say is your secret to success when it comes to podcasting and making it a success?
I think you just really have to love it. Like, that's the crux of it, really. And you have to know why it is that you're doing it. So even though I had 5 podcasts, like I did. So the first one was I would call it a big success. As I said, I grew a coaching business to multiple 6 figures off the back of it. The second, third, and fourth ones got a little bit further than 7 episodes, but not that much further. And then I pod faded those. And when I look back and I think about why it was that those didn't last, I think there were a few things. So one was that once you get used to podcasting, it's actually pretty easy to get set up. So in my mind, I was like, oh, this is so easy. I can just get a podcast set up. And so that's a good and a bad thing. It's a good thing because obviously the more of our voices are out there, the more that we can reach the people that we need to be serving. It's a bad thing because we just put, excuse my French, crap out there, frankly. Like, we just are like, well, this is really easy. I'm just going to throw things out there. And I think that's what I was finding that I did with my, my subsequent podcasts. I didn't have a clear audience, that I didn't know exactly who it was that I was trying to serve with those podcasts. I didn't therefore have clear content and know what I was trying, what was the end result? What's the outcome? What was how was I serving them? It was just like, let's just have these conversations and let's just, talk about stuff. And, there wasn't a really clear outcome. And when you start not getting results, so you don't see your listeners, and so that's the external, the external validation that you need, but also internally, I wasn't really feeling like, what am I didn't have a clear purpose with it. Like, as I said, I didn't know who I was serving and how I was serving them. Internally as well, I wasn't being driven. So when you have nothing external and nothing internal, that's when it gets really hard to keep going with something like a podcast, because it is a lot of work. It's a lot of work to show up every week or every month or whatever that cadence is, to put a podcast out there. So you need to almost know who it is that you're serving, and you need to know how it is that you're serving them. Like, what is that end result you're trying to get them? Because once you know that, then you start to get you get both. You get the external validation because people start listening. They'll start telling you how valuable your stuff is. And off the back of that, you get the internal validation because you're truly serving, then you're truly actually making an impact on people. And I think that's what's really important, to keep a podcast going.
Yeah, I love it because the first word that came from you was, you have to love it. I totally agree. If you don't love it, it feels like work, and it's a lot of work, right? So and it's a lot of work with very little return, I would say, especially in the beginning, right? You're just building it, and nobody's listening. So anyway, we all start from somewhere. We all start from zero. No one starts with
Yes.
$1,000 or $1,000,000, right? So how did you then decided to build Capsule, and how did it come about?
Yeah. So through my journey of trying to figure out how to grow a podcast, and when we say it's a lot of work, like growing a podcast is pretty much like growing a second business. I didn't realize that at the time, but then when I started it, I was like, oh, okay, this is a whole strategy that you need to put in place to grow a podcast, and it's very similar to how you would grow a business. And so when I was actually, trying to figure that out with my I call it my first podcast now, like the one for my coaching business. There was a full, I figured out this whole organic content strategy that fell off the back of my podcast. It was it was great because it was a streamlined way of, repurposing, of using the podcast content, but it was also not so great because it was still a lot of work. I still had to, get the transcript. I still had to read through the episode. I still had to pull the things out. I still had to create all the social media posts, and I had to create the blog post, and I had to create, the YouTube video, and I had to do all of these things that it's a lot. And so that's why I genuinely say, when, a podcast in itself can be like fun, but it's actually a lot of work to get a podcast out there and have it working. And so because I went through that journey myself, and at the time I was coaching e-commerce businesses, mainly women, and the one thing, a big reason why they went into e-commerce, into a product-based business, was because they didn't want to have to, show up themselves. They didn't want to have to tell their own stories, etc. And I was like, no, you have to. Like, that's literally, you are the only differentiator that you have as a small business. Anyone can sell any widget or any piece of clothing, but what differentiates your brand is you. And so it was a combination of that, where they were like, okay, I get it, Deirdre. I get that I have to tell my stories and share about myself, but I don't know how. It was a combination of trying to solve for that and trying to solve for my, own journey of how do I create this content off the back of my podcast quickly, efficiently, seamlessly. That was how Capsho came about. So when Capsho first launched in its first iteration, it was very, very rudimentary. It was to help my clients solve for, how do I tell my stories? So the software would actually take them through a way of, it would prompt them essentially to tell their stories, and then the software would take that and it would convert it into a whole bank of social media captions and emails. And so when we launched that was the end of 2021. I was like, oh my gosh, this can help all entrepreneurs. All entrepreneurs are going to love this. And as I even said for a podcast, if you don't know exactly who it is that you're targeting or that you're serving, you're going to get nowhere with it. And that's exactly what happened with the first iteration of Capsho, because we were like, we're going to help all entrepreneurs. All entrepreneurs is a freaking big, audience. Like, it is impossible to reach all entrepreneurs. So we really struggled actually to get, Capsho out there. And so when I was talking to a coach, he said, you've got a niche. You've got to really hone in on exactly who it is. So, and, I know this, we intuitively, I think, know this as business owners, but it's like, until you get told objectively that you're going down the wrong path, it's like, oh, okay. And so he was like, who do you want to serve? Who do you want to serve specifically within the entrepreneurship space? That, you don't have to convince that, for example, telling your story is an important thing. And again, because I'd been a podcaster for, by that time, probably, 18 months. By that point, I was like, this is a no-brainer. Like, podcasters are naturals at telling stories. That's just what they do day in, day out. And because as well, I knew my own struggles being a podcaster and trying to grow the thing organically. I knew that what we could do, that the next step that we could take in Capsho could be a game changer for podcasters, and specifically for entrepreneurs who podcast. So that's what we did. And so we launched the next iteration of Capsho in mid-July of 2022. So last year. And just very recently, literally actually a week ago, a little bit more than a week ago, we just launched version 2.0 of Capsho, which is another step change in how people use our software.
For people who are thinking of starting a podcast, or maybe they are new to the podcasting world, and they are just like trying to figure things out, or trying to build their audience, what are the top three that you would say, top three and most important things that every podcaster must do in order to grow their podcast and really like increase their downloads?
So the first I'm going to go back to, and I don't know if this is, I don't know whether I should use up one of my ones for this, but you have to know who you're speaking to. Everything falls off the back of this. And I actually just recorded a podcast episode on this topic, actually. It sounds so cliched. So I want to like really hammer this home, because I make this mistake myself as well. Literally with my last 3 podcasts, I made this mistake, which is not knowing specifically who I'm talking to. Now, do you need to know specifically who you're talking to day one when you start your podcast? Maybe not. But just don't expect to have anyone listening. Maybe when you start your podcast, it's just for you to get used to talking into a microphone. It's just to get used to hearing yourself, because that first time when you're hearing yourself, it is a nightmare. It's like I wanted to throw my phone across the room, because I'm like, get this thing away from me. So, so if you're new to podcasting, sometimes you're just like, okay, well, I just need to get used to talking. I just need to get used to hearing myself. I just need to get used to editing. Okay, that's fine. Okay, if you just want to start a podcast that way, without a clear audience, without a clear kind of outcome, except for you, just your own personal development, totally cool. I 100% support that. But very quickly, what you'll find if you don't want to pod fade is that there's only so much intrinsic motivation that you can get from that. Then you need to start to get the extrinsic motivation. And then extrinsic motivation is actually growing, like getting listeners, getting things like reviews, because that just makes you feel good, like all of that stuff. And that can only come with what I said the first time, which is knowing exactly who it is that you're talking to. So even if you followed my own story with my business, with Capsho, where I was like, we were going to target all entrepreneurs. And sometimes we think that that's a small enough niche. Like entrepreneurs is a subset of the whole of the global population, but it's really big. And without a place to start, like I could go, okay, well, if I'm going to target all entrepreneurs, for example, where do all entrepreneurs hang out? I'm like, I don't know. Like, I guess
Exactly.
right? Like you don't know. Whereas now when I'm like, okay, I'm speaking specifically to podcasters, I can go to Podfest, I can go to Podcast Movement. There are all these conferences, there are these meetups specifically for podcasters. And so I can already just hit the ground like literally and talk to my ideal audience, right? So I hope that people are seeing the difference between what we might think a niche is and what a niche actually is, which is if you can identify the 1, 2, 3 places where they are all congregating, then you probably have found yourself a niche, because you can go there and you can talk about the fact that you have this podcast that is for them, right? Specifically for them. So that's the first, you have to know who it is you're speaking to. And now the reason why this is more than just a conceptual exercise, it's like actually a tangible exercise, is because when you know who it is that you're speaking to, you start to know the specific content that you're going to talk to them about. So I have someone in my community who he knows who he's talking to. So he's speaking specifically to faith-based dads, right? And again, faith-based, like he could, if you think about that, like there are literal communities on Facebook that are just for faith-based dads. There are communities like, actual offline communities. So, that are run by churches and things like that are specifically for faith-based dads. So that is a niche that is small enough. But then with his content, he was like, well, I'm going to talk to them about faith. Obviously, I'm going to talk to them about family because that's important to them. I'm going to talk to them about finances and fitness and health and all of these things. Now, and this is why there's actually more work than just knowing who it is that you're speaking to, because you can know who you're speaking to, but then if you start talking to them about literally everything, then that won't help you grow. And the reason why is because in this world, more and more, when we put out content, all content is SEO optimized in some way. So we talk a lot about Google, etc. We talk a lot about, even now social media is all is SEO optimized. But the only way that you can get known for and get your podcast known for what it is that you want it to get known is to hone in on a specific topic. Because again, all of those platforms are run by machines, right? It's all algorithmic based. They are not smart enough yet to know that, like that, in this example, that Jerry is known for faith and family and fitness and finance. There's too many things. There's too many topics. So it's not just about honing in on who it is that you're speaking to, but it's also honing in on what you speak to them about. So when after a conversation with him, he's like, well, I'm not a subject matter expert at finance. I'm not a subject matter expert on faith in terms of he's not like a pastor or a minister or anything, right? So he's like, okay, well, I'm just going to focus in on family. That's the thing that he knows. And so he can then, once he's now targets all of his content on family, on this family pillar of his, talking to faith-based dads about family, then that is when the search engines, etc., can pick up on the fact that this is what he's an expert in and this is what we can rank him on. So there is actually like a tangible impact of going through this conceptual understanding. So know who your audience is, know exactly what content that you're speaking to them, and then actually speak to them about that, right? So that's kind of, if it kind of goes step 1, step 2, step 3, speak to them about that. And the podcast is a really great way, again, for you to figure out this content. And then, I developed Capsho to do this, but it doesn't have to be Capsho. It can be anything else that you find. It can be ChatGPT if you want to spend the time, learning how to do all that. But then you want to create content that is for that person. And I mean other content that's leveraging your podcast. How do you cut it up, slice and dice it, bring another perspective even to that particular episode, that you can turn into other long form content. So whether it's a blog post, whether it's LinkedIn articles, whether it's a YouTube video, but also short form pieces. So, for social media, and things like that. So because that's how you best amplify. I was speaking to the CEO and co-founder of Mopod, which is a software that helps you run ads to boost your podcast. And his number one strategy, it's really funny, I was speaking to him about, hey, what would be your best advice for anyone wanting to get started in paid ads? His number one strategy is nail your organic marketing first. Right? Everything starts with organic marketing, because when you can nail your organic marketing, which is that step 3 that I'm talking about, which is how do you use your podcast content to organically get it out there, organically get the eyeballs and earbuds on your content. Once you nail that, that is when you then can put fuel on the fire through money. But before that, don't even think about that. It's really about how you nail it organically. So yeah, that's kind of my long-winded 1, 2, 3 top tips for actually starting and growing a podcast.
I love it. Yeah, it's so true, because that is the reason, actually, I don't mind sharing. That is the reason why I started my second podcast, because I realized my first podcast it talks too much about other things, like everything. So now I sort of narrowed down my focus, and so I decided to start a second podcast. How do we really like cut through the noise and stand out as a podcaster when there are so many podcasts out there? How do we stand out?
I think it's really going to be about finding your own voice. It's it's kind of like, there's a reason why there's so many cliches floating around, and I always feel like I go back to them, but there's a reason why. It's because they are actually true. Someone who would listen to me. So, for example, I have a podcast for podcasters about how to grow a podcast. But there are many out there. And I'm good friends with a lot of them, like Dave Jackson, Kevin Schmidlin, Adam Adams. Like, I've been on their podcast as well, but I'm also good friends with them. And the reason why I don't see them as competition or whatever, is because we all have different voices and we all bring different things. So someone who, will really vibe with Dave and the way that because he has much more of like a radio style, show, whereas mine is much more narrative style show. Kevin's is very like, direct, straight to the point type show. Like and then there's Daniel Lewis, who has much more of a technical, like, show for podcasters. And so we all technically are kind of talking about the same things or very similar things, but we all have our own styles because we all have our own voices. And I think that's the thing. It's like you never want to be copying someone else's voice. You just want to be authentically you and bring your own voice, because that is when you actually find your followers and your audience, and they're going to vibe with you. So someone who is a fan of mine might not actually really like Dave's show, for example, because it might be a little bit too random, or vice versa, right? Someone who likes his might not like mine, and that's okay, because there is enough people in the world that you can all collectively serve. And so so hopefully that answers your question, but I would basically just say find your own voice. And sometimes it might take a little while to get there, but that's okay. I'm still getting there, to be honest. And then really double down on that, because you're going to find your people.
I love that, because it's so true that to stand out, you just have to be yourself. I mean, as cliche as it sounds, but it's true, right? Because like you said, people follow you, it's because they like you. It's just as simple as that. And now when I think about the podcast that I listen to, why out of so many podcasts that I only listen to one or two or three, it's because I like the host, right? I like their style of interview, and yeah. So it's really, you have to find your own voice, you have to find your style, and just how do you do that? Just be yourself. So
Yes.
thank you so much. I really appreciate you taking your time out of your busy day. So tell my listeners where they can find you online and how they can get connect with you.
Yeah. So if you are getting into podcasting, or if you're a podcaster, definitely come and try Capsho out. So that's capsho.com. You can try it for free for an episode. It will literally in under 10 minutes create everything that you need to organically market your podcast. So I'm talking title and description, your show notes, your podcast website content, your social media captions, an email, a blog post, LinkedIn article, YouTube description. It'll pull out quotes for you from your episode as well. It has changed the game for podcasters. Like, I get people DMing me or emailing me all the time saying like they started at 75 listeners a podcast, now they're at over 1,000 since using Capsho. So it does work. You do have to, AI will only get you so far. So it'll get you 70-80% of the way there. It's a first draft. But again, if you go back to, your audience, what content that they want, you make your tweaks to those drafts, and that is how you are going to be able to get the organic marketing wheel flying for you. So yeah, come and try Capsho out, capsho.com. And if you do, you'll get onto my email list, and that's how, you can sort of get in contact with me from there.
Awesome. All right, guys, I hope you learned a lot from our guest today. If you have any question, leave a comment below and we will get back to you. To connect with me and learn more about what I do, follow me on Instagram at Deirdre Tshien Coaching. And if you haven't subscribed yet, make sure you hit the subscribe button so you never miss another juicy episode. Thanks for tuning in today. Until next time, show up. Success doesn't show up for you until you show up and pursue your own success. Thank you for listening to the Show Up Show with me, Deirdre Tshien. If you want to create more confidence, visibility, and authority in your business, send me a message on Instagram at Deirdre Tshien Coaching. DM me the word show up, and I will send you my free signature training, Visibility Creates Possibilities, that you can watch right away to start exploding your visibility today.